On this episode, I sit down with the great Joel Pilger, creative industry leader, founder of Impossible Pictures, and trusted advisor and mentor for top studio owners. He also hosts the Fabulous Podcast and Fuse, an international dinner series fostering meaningful connections and peer support. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Conversations with Bryan Grant. Thank you again so much for being here. What an honor and
My
privilege.
pleasure. I love it. I love this fun stuff.
What I'm most interested in is let's kind of start maybe from the beginning. Okay. You were born and raised in Georgia, right?
That's correct. Atlanta, Georgia, son of a Delta Airlines pilot.
And he was not only that, but didn't he serve in the U.S. Air Force before that?
He did. He served in the Air Force. He was a graduate at the University of Wisconsin in economics. But yeah, the Air Force called, and that determined his course of becoming a pilot and Delta and all the rest. And he worked his entire career as a Delta pilot out of Atlanta, Georgia.
I lost my father a year ago.
Man.
And your father, Captain Joel Pilger, right? Served in the U.S. Air Force, distinguished 32-year career at the pilot at Delta, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
He passed 6 years ago.
That's correct.
What do you miss most about him?
It's easy. My dad was easily my biggest cheerleader because throughout my entire life with him, it's funny how I grew up as a creative kid and he didn't quite ever really get me because he was more of the athletic kid and sporty and all that kind of thing. And yet he, as my dad, always said, Joel, do what you love. The money will follow, right? You'll be happy. And he actually talked me out of becoming an airline pilot. Now, I was in 6th grade, but he said, no, you're going to do something much more amazing with your life than being an airline pilot like me. And for most of my adult life, we would talk at least once a week, usually on Sundays. And he just wanted to know, what's going on with your business? What's going on with your career? What's going on? What are the exciting things that you're doing? Because he lived vicariously through me, because he always had this dream of doing entrepreneurial things. And so through his son, he got to experience all of that with me. And that's absolutely what I miss the most.
Let me ask you this, because I know generationally, was your father, even though you said, he aspired to be an entrepreneur, was it one of those things where, he's married to your mom, Abigail, right? You and your sister, Susan, he's got a family. He probably made a comfortable living. Was that something that he knew was safe because he was a family man and wanted to have that security versus the much more risky business, as we both know, of being an entrepreneur?
I'm going to say yes. It's a bit oversimplified to answer a yes or no, but my impression was my dad knew that he had a great career as a pilot, and he never took that for granted because it afforded us not only a good living, but a great life of travel, which my family very much took advantage of. But he had 2 or 3 entrepreneurial ventures throughout his life that he tried and he explored, and he had some missteps. He had some failures, nothing huge, but it was enough that I think in those days, we're talking the late 20th century, that the world just wasn't nearly as open now. There was no, let me go on YouTube and see if I can understand how to figure this entrepreneurial game out. So I think those setbacks, there was something in him that he tried, but it didn't work. And he tried, it didn't work, and it tried, and it didn't work. And he ultimately said, I'm just going to continue this career as a pilot. And he did that until he retired.
That's incredible. Is it true that one of your first loves was filmmaking and cinema? What inspired you as a kid to get into that?
It's a fun story, and we could go way down a rabbit hole here if we decide to. I was a creative kid more in the sense of I loved to draw and I loved to, I don't know, do art and theater and some of that kind of stuff, right? I was also fortunate that my best friend, Mike, a friend named Mike Thompson, lived across the street from me. And from the age of 4, we were thick as thieves and we were always scheming a way to do something entrepreneurial. So it was kind of a combination of, hey, let's do something creative, right? Like let's have a comic book. Let's create a magazine. Let's make a film and make a movie. And the idea was always to do something fun and creative, but make money. And it was that combination that has absolutely been like the thread throughout my life. So the story of the movie was my buddy Mike, his uncle, gave him an 8mm camera and an 8mm editor and said, hey guys, here you go. We, of course, immediately were all infatuated with Star Wars because it had just come out the year before. So we said, let's write a script. We wrote a script, called it Cosmic Battles. It was this epic saga that was basically a ripoff of Star Wars. And then we engaged all of our friends in the neighborhood to be the actors in the film, shot the film, edited the film, of course, opened a theater and charged 7 cents a ticket to have all the kids in the neighborhood and from all around the suburbs of Atlanta come see the movie in the theater. And we made $13, I think we grossed. So, run the math. We had a lot of showings. And it was both creative and entrepreneurial. And I could tell you probably 20, 30, 40 more stories like that of what my childhood was like.
Well, let me tell you something. During this, we're showing a clip of Cosmic Battles, which people can see on Vimeo, but all of the link, and this is, we're playing it now.
Amazing.
And so I was watching it last night, and for 1979, pretty good visual effects, my friend. I mean, not only people do you see, not going to give it away, but some of it, when the fishing line with over blue screen.
Of course.
But then you had like the laser shooting out.
Of course.
How did you do that with that 8mm video camera being 12 years old?
Yeah, well, first of all, it was a film camera, so we had film, and what we had learned somewhere.
What did I say?
Yeah, you said video.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, totally. Film camera, 8mm.
Yeah, film. Video came later, but yeah, no, you could scratch the film. So when you have actual film, you can scratch it with a needle. So you take a pin to the emulsion, and if you push down lightly, it creates a black, dark, laser beam. And of course, if you scratch hard, it pushes all the way through the emulsion, and it's white. And it's got this weird grain and texture to it. And of course, it wiggles every time you do it on the frame because it's moving around. It's just a cheap visual effect that somehow, somewhere, we learned it and said, well, hell, let's use that to make lasers and, lightsabers and all that kind of stuff.
What did you cut that on?
So we had an 8mm editor, which you have to understand was a lot like the most basic moviola, if you've ever seen one of these things. Meaning there's a reel on the left and a reel on the right containing film, and then the film comes together and you splice it. So you get the two pieces of film, you put it together, you get a special piece of tape for making the edit, and you put the film together, and now you've got a cut, right? Now, of course, we were young kids. We were too cheap to have actual splicing tape. So we used, what else? Scotch tape, and just made it work. And we would sit there and spin the reels and find the place in the film where, let's cut that out because that's where, you dropped the camera or something, or where the person laughed, and then cut it to make it match this. And over the course of whatever the 11-minute movie or something was, I'm sure there were 30 or 40 edits. And so that was my first exposure to editing as a 12-year-old.
Incredible also that it sounds like you came from a very supportive family, because when I was that age, I had an 8mm video camera, the Sony CCDs, right? So we're talking early 90s.
Yeah.
And in the same spirit was shooting films. And, then I went into bar bat mitzvahs and weddings and did that, and actually did so many to pay my first year of school. And then graduated to SVHS, right?
S video, baby.
Which I do miss the tangible editing controllers. Do you remember? I mean, even with like 3/4 inch U-matic, that's how my first professional editing career was. I miss that.
Yeah, sure. The
But
knobs,
okay.
the buttons.
But yeah, and stop frame animation. And so it's really cool because that, it seems like, especially at 7 cents a ticket, that was your first kind of entrepreneurial payoff with a creative passion, right?
Yes. Yes.
Incredible. Okay. So we're going to fast forward to you going to Georgia Institute of Technology.
Yep. Georgia Tech.
But what some people might not know, did you go, is it true, University of London?
Mm-hmm.
British Theater and Culture.
Yeah, my parents, again, this is the blessing of freaking great parents. From the time that I was very young, they said to both my sister and I, hey, kids, someday when you're in college, you're going to spend a summer abroad. And it was just a given. And I was at Georgia Tech. I think it was my third year. I had enrolled in the industrial design program. And my parents said, hey, we think this is your summer. I enrolled in a summer abroad at the University of London, studying British theater, British culture. Now, full disclosure, I wanted to do international marketing at, I can't remember the university in Paris, the Sorbonne or something. And it was full. The only thing that still had slots open was British theater and culture. And I thought, damn it. Okay, well, I guess I'll just deal. Turned out to be freaking amazing. Loved London, loved the British people, loved the history and the culture. And yeah, it's just been one of those great experiences that absolutely blew my mind. At that age, of course, spending an entire summer right in London and in Europe, it was life-changing.
How incredible, though, that your parents pushed that, because my parents never did that. Do you feel that they pushed because they wish they had that opportunity and didn't?
Yes. Yes, I think that's the quickest way to put it, is that they both, from a young age, let's say this, when they met, they were like classic conservatives, which is not at all like today, the way we would define it. They were these Goldwater Republicans. They were big fans of Ayn Rand, if you know who this philosopher is, and objectivism. So if you've seen The Fountainhead or some of those, Atlas Shrugged, these famous novels, they were way into that philosophy, which was this very like beautiful orientation of, the man's highest achievement in life is to discover who he is and to live it and express it and be it. And so those ideals just trickle, not only influence them, but it trickled down into their kids. So I think they very much viewed it as, hey, we may not have had all these opportunities, but we're sure as hell going to make sure our kids have these opportunities.
That's beautiful. Like,
Incredible.
back then, maybe you didn't know this, but like, as we get older and we look back, like, what an opportunity, right? Like, I wish I had that.
Oh, I mean, yeah, believe me, I'm having goosebumps just sort of retelling it right now.
So you graduate, you got into a lot of, I assume, like product rendering and 3D, and started really loving animation and
Yep.
that part of it, right?
Yep, exactly.
One of the things I respect about you is that, is it true that right after school, you didn't do anything safe? You kind of like jumped right into, right, Impossible Pictures?
Almost. Yeah, I was actually starting to freelance as an industrial designer my junior and senior year at Georgia Tech, just because, I don't know, I just was scrappy. I was comfortable with hustling and making things happen. So then when I graduated, I had an opportunity to start doing freelance animation work and 3D work because I thought it was cool. And I did spend about a year stint working with a nonprofit, which was a job, right? And I got trained on all of these high-end tools that this this charitable organization had, which was Softimage and Flame and Matador and all these Silicon Graphics workstations.
You must
and
have
all
been
this.
freaking out, by the way, with that kind of software.
Oh my
Because
God.
I would have been nuts.
I was,
right?
I mean, every day I'm walking into like a $5 million,
Right.
one of the first digital production environments in the world. So I learned and learned and learned and learned. But within about a year, I said, I'm out of here, because I had this weird dream of, I want to try this idea of running some sort of a studio, some sort of a shop of my own. And I got an opportunity to pitch the Charlotte Hornets, the NBA team. And so right around the time I was thinking of leaving this full-time job, I went and pitched the Charlotte Hornets, and I won what, maybe in today's dollars was a $50,000 animation project to do their animated opener for their broadcast games. And I was like, that's it. Here we go. That's the first project that's going to start my new company. And I promptly called my dad and said, Dad, can I borrow some money? Because this in today's dollars,
like
this would have been
$50,000, right?
Oh, easy. In those dollars, that was 30 years ago, right? So in today's dollars, call it $100,000. And thank God my dad said, that sounds fantastic. Sure. I'll loan you that money. And that was the start of Impossible.
I've been blessed with very supportive parents in what we do. Let's just say creative arts, to oversimplify it, right? Something not
Sure.
safe, something risky, right?
Right.
The fact that your father supported that, and then that kind of move, that's unbelievable. I just, things to be grateful for, right? I mean, that's really unbelievable.
Huge. And look, let's call it what it is. I mean, there's also there's this enormous luck, privilege, everything that goes with that. And so I don't take it for granted for a second. But I'm also going to tell you this one little moment several years later when I had just landed a big project for Ford through their agency, JWT. And I called my dad and I said, hey, I need to borrow money again because I got to buy the next bigger computer and rendering power and all this sort of stuff. And he said, no, you need a relationship with a banker. So I'm out. And I'm like, wait, Dad, you've been my biggest fan, my biggest supporter. And he says, no, it's time. And guess what? He was absolutely right. And that was like the next chapter in my career was, how do you go to a bank and get a commercial loan and deal with all of that? So on the one hand, he was there to support and do whatever it took, but also he knew how to push me and show me tough love and
instill independence.
Yeah, instill independence. Yeah. I mean, I still to this day, I'm a little bit like, damn, he really did that. He really said no. And I'm actually incredibly grateful, of course.
People who are listening who either own a studio or thinking about it, what's the biggest misconception that people have of owning a studio? And by studio, the motion design world.
Right. Yeah. The biggest misconception is that being great at the creative work is what it really takes and everything else will somehow take care of itself. Meaning that actually to have a strong business as a motion design studio, for your example, there are actually 7 areas of business. Again, I learned this the hard way. And creative is just one of them. Okay. And so these are things like sales, production, finance, operations, okay, marketing, around you go, right? And I'll just tell you this, if you suck at any one of those areas, you're not in business. So the biggest misconception is, oh, I'm really great at this creative work. I should go do this work. And what I would say is get a job. Get a job and do the creative work. And don't be sad about that. Because unless you really love the idea of, I'm going to master sales, I'm going to master production and managing clients, I'm going to master finance and going to a bank and borrowing money. I mean, all these things, that this is the misconception. And most people bump up against this because they start to see some success and all of these areas of business start coming at them and they're overwhelmed.
Not prepared.
not prepared, right? Frustrated, or they just get taken out because maybe taxes, right? Or they suck at sales, whatever the area might be that they don't have mastery of, it comes back to bite them. And it can be for me, it was really 7 years. This is the part people don't know. It was 7 years before I started to actually grasp these different areas of business. And that's why for the first 7 years, Impossible Pictures was not really a very serious concern. It was me and maybe one other person. My wife was doing the books and, you know, so the story that everyone sees now of like, 25 people and hundreds of freelancers and all this beautiful work. Well, that came later. That was after 7 long years.
This is not an overnight success, right?
No, very much. No, it's this. And I can remember a moment one time when I was a panelist at the Colorado State of the State, which was when all the production and people get together. And somebody in the audience was asking me, like, how did you do this? Right? Because you just moved the studio into downtown Denver a couple of years ago. And I said, well, what you don't know is it did take me almost 10 years to become an overnight success. So there's just a lot there.
Your upbringing in Georgia, and then moving to Denver and, launching that company. Why not LA or New York?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because that's actually one of the areas that I have some regret, because I moved to Colorado because when I was a kid, this goes back to my parents, the first time they took me to Colorado, I think this was 1976. We go to Vail. I see the mountains. I see the snow. I'm hearing John Denver on the radio. I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing. I am going to live here when I grow up. And my parents just smiled and said, yeah, and we would go skiing there every winter. And then we started going to dude ranches in the summer. It was, so when I got married, my partner and I both had this similar itch of, wouldn't it be cool to see if we could pull that off? And so we went for it. Now, once we got out there, it was the worst idea in the world to start a studio in Colorado, because there was nothing going on. It was just, there wasn't really a community. There wasn't a whole lot going on.
What year is this?
This would have been 95.
Yeah.
96.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. 95, 96. And it ended up being the best idea, even though it was the worst idea, because, right, we made it work. I made it happen. And there was, of course, many people I give credit to, not just myself. But as the years played out, there was a big part of me that said, man, I should have gotten a job at a New York studio or an LA studio for at least a couple years, because that would have been a major accelerator in my career. But it worked out. So I'm happy with the path I have. But to anyone that's saying, I might want to follow that similar path, I would say, do the New York, do the LA thing for a few years, because there's so much to be learned there that goes way beyond the craft, right? And the creative. Yeah.
There's also something correct. And there's also something about, even back in college, and I tell people, yes, get a job in that. But I think that the takeaway is immerse yourself in the environment. And that can even start with an internship. There's something that happens that you'll never learn in school. When you immerse yourself in that environment, by osmosis, something happens. You're in the real world, right?
1,000,000%. Yeah, it's being immersed in that university setting, in that professional setting. There is so much osmosis, to use your word, that happens when you are in the trenches with that senior art director, that creative director, and you are like shoulder to shoulder with that person, trying to solve the thing, trying to innovate, trying to figure out a way to get that stupid thing to render, whatever it is. And you learn things like bedside manner and how to collaborate and how to be a good team player. You learn the business side of things because you understand what things cost and how people are charging, and you learn what the client's needs are, right? Because you're face to face with these big clients and how they're making decisions. So it's all those things. And I could go on and on. I think your point is absolutely well made.
What's going on now with London? And maybe you have better visual of this, but it seems like in the last 2 or 3 years, and especially if anyone who's watching is on LinkedIn, it seems like every 3 weeks there's postings of work from these London studios. What
Mhm.
is going on in London?
Something really, really cool.
Right?
And it's funny you say that actually, because I don't hear many people picking up on that. What
Oh my
I've
god.
noticed, yeah, what I've noticed is that New York, of course, the studios here, there's quite a few great ones that are crushing it. Same thing with LA, but there's like another, I don't know, level of something happening in London because I hosted one of my dinners that I do with founders.
We're
This
gonna
was
get into that.
okay, yeah, this was late last year. And what I noticed was my invite list. There were about 20 or so founders that I invited. And when I looked back at the list, once I had everyone on that, that accepted the RSVP, I looked at the list. I said, "Oh my God, these people are killing it, and these people are like the best of the best," and so on. And I got to the bottom of the list, and I said, "Wow, what's going on in London?" Because everybody that's coming to this is like top, and they're really busy, and they're producing beautiful work,
Very
and
good work.
we're seeing, yeah, very good work. So I don't have the short answer, but I do. I'm observing the same thing, and I'm cheering, right? So I'm making sure that I'm going to be in London at least a couple times a year to just keep learning and absorbing and seeing what's going on here. What are they doing right? Right? What can the rest of us learn from them?
For you, Joel, when you said that you're looking down that list of all these amazing studios, do you ever have like a pinch me moment or like imposter syndrome? Like, and you're one of the guys that like in our industry, I'll start out by saying that I highly respect, and I rarely say that. Um, Even though this is the first time we've spoken, so it's such a joy to have you and have this conversation on a Sunday when you can be with your family. When you're looking down at the list, are you like, God, what can I teach these guys? Or do you know what I mean? Do you ever have that moment of these guys are kicking ass? Obviously, it doesn't matter how successful you are. I think that even self growth, like there's always something to improve.
Yeah,
But do you ever have that moment like, oh my God, like I'm nervous, like what am I going to teach them?
it was very pronounced 10 years ago when I was new to this thing of consulting and advising and all that. Because even though Impossible was quite successful by most people's standards, still, you look at studios like the Bucks of the world, State, Big Star, The Mill, all these kinds of people. Yeah, no, I was not ever at that level, especially creatively. Especially, like, I feel like our work was quite good, but was it great? It's been a process over the last 10 years of showing up and being insatiably curious and learning not only what I learned over my 20 years running my own business, but now having worked with hundreds and hundreds, my job really is to be the most curious person in the world who is constantly asking not only why isn't this not working, but also why is this working? Like what is going on in London, as we talked about a minute ago? My job is to get my ass over there and spend time in that market with those people and understand what's going on. So, yeah, when I had my London dinner, sure, there were a few people that I looked at and said, wow, I guess I'm really more humbled. It's not that I don't feel
Hmm.
that imposter syndrome thing anymore. It's more that I feel like, wow,
Hmm.
I am so fortunate that someone that I respect this much and is working at this level and this caliber is going to spend an evening with me and our peers investing, right, in sharing and all that. It feels, I feel extremely privileged, honestly.
Totally. And do you like outside of form, which we'll get into, and we'll do a proper, segment of all the great stuff you're doing, the podcast and everything else, volunteer work and your family. Do you ever, like, in your curiosity and your passion and love for what we do in this industry, do you ever just like travel without it being like business related, as far as like, the exchange of, Joel, you're a master of what you do. Here's money. Let's talk. Do you ever just kind of like go to some places just because you want to learn, and like you just invite someone out to dinner and then leave the next day or 2 days later?
Very often. In fact, I'm gonna reveal maybe a little secret here. That's actually more often the case. So when I travel, because I travel all the time extensively, I love it.
Delta?
Yes, absolutely, of course. Diamond medallion, baby. The the impression from the outside, people looking in, is, oh, Joel is in Barcelona because he is working with Blit, and he's in London because he's working with Found, or whatever it might be. The reality is, most of the time, I'm going because I am curious. Yes, I want to work with the client that I have there, and we need to do work, but I can do a lot of that remotely over Zoom. So really the reason I go is because the relationships. I want to spend face time with that founder. I want to meet a few other people while I'm there.
You
And I
have to,
also,
right?
yeah, but I call myself a cultural omnivore. I love going to different cultures and just immersing myself in the local language, the culture, the art, the design, the whatever. And this to me is just part of what makes me maybe a more rich and informed and more, I don't know, productive or beneficial human, is just to be this well-rounded person who's seen so much and experienced so much. And then my job, of course, is to give it back and share it. And
Would you agree in that same sentiment? Would you agree that studios have a disadvantage of not doing the same darn thing with just potential clients and people anyway? Like, in other words, get out of your house or your studio and travel. Not travel as in like, yes, the culture and all the beautiful things, but I mean more like a business sense, like new business, just go out and fly in, like you just said, and meet these people, invite them to lunch, to dinner, whatever, host something, right? Is
big
that
time,
something you teach? Is that
big time,
valuable? It
big
is.
time. There's a concept that I teach inside Jumpstart, which is an accelerator thing. And the concept is experts travel. And this is something that I experienced where I
Experts
remember,
travel. That's great. Go on. Yeah.
yeah, super simple, right? But I can remember, I remember a buddy of mine, Ryan Bramwell, who used to be the founder at Spilt in Denver. And I remember saying to him one day, many years ago, how did you get all this great work from these places in New York? And he said, I went there. And when he explained, I reached out, I made friends with these people. Same thing with my buddy Mitch Monson, who's
Hmm.
now a creative exec at Sibling Rivalry.
I worked with him at Motion. Go ahead.
Right on. Okay, Mitch is a legend, right?
He's great. Go ahead.
Similarly, right? He was the guy that knew the DP in Reykjavik, and he was the guy that had worked with the motion studio in Dubai, and he was always bringing new relationships and connections and things. And what I remember, once I started doing this and actually going, I started to experience the same thing, making connections, broadening my horizons, bringing work back from New York. I mean, what's cooler than that if you run a studio in Denver and you're bringing back big six-figure projects from New York? And at the time, I remember my peers who were running other studios in Denver, we would all hang out and they would ask me, how'd you do it? And I would tell them, get your ass on a plane, get the meeting, go. And they would say, yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know what? They wouldn't do it because there's this myth, and it's worse than ever right now, called you can work from anywhere. And I would say, yeah, it's true. You can do the work from
That has
anywhere. But guess
nothing to
what?
do with your point.
That has nothing to do with the point. The
Right.
work isn't coming to you if you live in Saskatchewan. Now, if you want to have a studio
That's
there,
silly.
more power to you. But trust me, if you want the work and you want to build the relationships, you have to go to them. And you better start with New York, LA, London, and then from there, keep going, because building those relationships in person is the most ridiculous advantage that none of your peers are going to do. and you'll be way ahead of everybody else. But I swear, there's people listening right now that are like, yeah, maybe I should do that. And they won't.
They
And
won't.
it kills me.
But okay, but Joel, but why? Is it financial burden? Is it self-confidence? I- Can we
Yes.
oversimplify a reason or
I mean, it's mostly fear of, well, if I spend that time, that energy, and that attention, must, nothing might come of it. In fact, something worse is I might get rejected or I might embarrass myself. And what I would say is, I could tell you stories. Absolutely. That probably will happen, but you will also learn and grow like crazy. And as you start to master this art, okay, there's a book called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi that I highly recommend because it really shifted my thinking into, wow, people don't buy from companies, people buy from people.
Mhm.
So this is like the whole source of the dinner series that I do, and why when I travel, I'm always making new connections and bringing people together. This is actually what our business is. It's helping people, and to help them, you got to know them. And if you build relationships with them, it's just a total game changer.
Absolutely. And it's, you can have the greatest reel and win awards, but I feel like maybe back in the day that helped some to get new work, but at the end of the day, especially with founders and owners, like you have to constantly be working on that. Like you cannot be lazy. Okay, so here's a story. So when I was freelancing, um this was late 90s, early 2000s, and in Los Angeles. And so many studios went under because they would get that six-figure job. Now all of a sudden, okay, now we have to get brick and mortar. Now we shouldn't be renting computers. Now we have to get 12 G3s and
Right.
this, that, and the other. And the work doesn't come.
Right. 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 Because they go all in on, hey, we just broke through. Now the jobs are just going to keep coming. But this is like the first taste of the feast or famine cycle.
Do you see that a lot today?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to your point, having great work it's a common, well-known thing. You'll hear people say the great work is table stakes, right? Like it's your ticket into the game, but it doesn't guarantee you're going to win the game at all. It just gets you on the field because today, right? Guess what?
Everyone can do great stuff,
In fact, it's
right?
I mean, this is the painful version. The painful version is no matter how great you are, there's somebody greater. Like think about that.
Correct.
No matter how freaking amazing you are, there's somebody better. So
Correct.
if you're positioning, if your angle is work with us because we're great, guess what? There's somebody greater and you're hiding it. You're pretending that you're the best. And that's just never been a valid argument or a valid way to position you and your business out there in the world, because it actually goes way beyond just how cool the work is.
This is a great segue into some of the quotes that you have thrown.
Here we go. You're going to call me out.
I've done my homework. No, this is good. No, listen, I mean, this is awesome. And I agree with these, but this is incredible. The first one is, and then I've got a speed round, which we'll do in a minute, but which I don't think that you've probably ever had a speed round in an interview, have you?
Not in 8 years. How about that?
I was pretty ballsy thinking it was the first one. Talk about ego. Okay, here we go. You said, this is on social, fake it till you make it is shit. Fake it and go make it. I couldn't agree more. And this is kind of like what we were talking about in regard to, and go make it. Go make the fucking thing. Go get the client. Just go do, right? And I feel like, and I try and mentor and have a lot of friends who are still freelancers, and especially in 2020, and we all know about the debacle last year, and it kind of even started 2024 and started in 2023. Why are people sitting around waiting for work? I don't care if you have to pretend it's a job and just do it and then put it on your reel. Why don't more people get that?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew what there is this thing in human nature that I think it's when we're younger, maybe let's call it an immaturity if I'm being tough. That sounds judgy.
No, no,
But
do it.
but it's this idea that we are trained as kids through the school system, by society, whatever, to wait for permission. And then I think as we go through life, as we grow and evolve and we start trying and we start overcoming fears, we start getting some confidence, we start to realize, wow, it was never about waiting for permission. It was about showing up in however you want to best show up and make and create and do and go. And once you start doing that, you get a taste and you realize it's what Steve Jobs talked about when he said you can kind of poke and prod reality and it starts to bend and shape, that you realize the whole world around us was all just it's all just made up shit that somebody else
And
said this is what we're going to make. And it's like, your turn. What are you going to make? Go.
there are people who create things that are no smarter than you. They're just doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, there might be something to be said for, we also as humans, we default to an imposter syndrome early in our careers because we look at those founders, those studios, those people that are way ahead of us, and we somehow think that, well, that's Buck, right? We think that that's fill in the blank, and that's like, that's different. The rules don't apply to them. It's much harder for me. And then once you start, and this is one reason experts travel again, is when you start getting out there and you start connecting with other founders that are way ahead of you, you know what? They're going to sit down with you and they'll be happy to tell you what it took and how they got there. And you're going to realize so clearly, oh, you mean all they did was show up every damn day. They just put their pants on one leg at a time. They showed up, and you turn around 10 years later, you're amazed at what you've accomplished. But it starts with starting.
This one's actually really great. And anyone who's listening, I completely agree. If your studio is just taking on projects, it's a race to the bottom. The shift moving from order taker to problem solver. Duh. Like, why don't more studios and people get that? And by the way, I'm not coming off like, I had to learn that too, like completely, but have been doing this for a very long time. And for sure I had to learn that because I didn't always. But especially now where, it's not just taking on projects now, like, and I feel like this happened within the last 10 years where even like boutique motion design companies are now like ad agencies, and now they have strategy. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, like you could charge that and should charge that
Mm-hmm.
and create more value. Once you say it's not just project driven or just the creative, but you have to offer more, is that like enlightening to more people than not?
I think everyone feels the heat, that anyone in this industry knows, wow, the earth is kind of shifting beneath our feet. And the projects aren't coming as easily. The marketplace is more crowded, right? Budgets are going down, demands are going up, all this thing, right? This is the process of ephemeralization, which is a big word we can unpack. But I think the simple equation is, it used to be easier. Okay. So there's always this tape playing in our heads. So my partner and I at Impossible, we used to call it the glory days, that we could go down to Mexico City, we could pitch an ad agency, they would send us boards, and we'd be doing a $2, $3, $400,000 animated commercial a few weeks later, right? That was then. Fast forward to today. Yes, there's this thing in you that says, well, you know what? Maybe if we just keep doing what we've always done, the projects will come. And then, like the classic book, Who Moved My Cheese? The cheese stops showing up. But there's this thing inside of it that might say, yeah, but we just need to wait a little longer. We just need to be nicer. We need to just wait and see. And the reality is that's actually a slow death. It's a slow death. And the death is, as you described it, is if we are just executing projects, we are already on the bottom half of the value pyramid. Like we're already slowly racing to the bottom. And the shift is, and it's not easy. It's uncomfortable. It's called, you mean I have to learn and grow and evolve and figure out how to create way more value than just
feel
executing the
uncomfortable?
project? Yeah. And it's a little terrifying because you think, well, what if I put myself out there and I fail? And what if I pitch and I lose? And what if, and what if, and what if? And, it's like, well, you can stay here in the maze. Again, the Who Moved My Cheese example. You can stay here and hope that the cheese eventually shows up again, or we can get out there and start exploring and learning and growing. And this is the better way. But I have to empathize with people that sometimes your previous success is the greatest barrier to your future success.
Say that again.
That your previous success is sometimes the biggest obstacle or hindrance to your future success. Because
it's incredible.
You're convinced if we just do like we've always done, it used to work. So we just have to keep doing that and try harder. And you double down on the path towards slow death.
That's true, I would say, in any business category, right?
Sure. That's why they
I know we're
billions of that book.
Things. Yeah, no, exactly. What would be the first thing that you would recommend someone to start offering or learning outside of, okay, we can just do this really cool 2D, 3D project. What else can we offer? How would you answer that?
Yeah, well, in terms of if you're running a small studio, you're going to find a certain level of success because you're super smart, you're talented, you're creative, and people are going to award you projects and off you go. Then complexity starts to kick in, and I call this complexity plateau, where you start taking on art directing and creative directing, and now you're producing, and now you're bookkeeping, and now you're hiring and firing and trying to make all the computers work and figuring out IT. And then you hit this ceiling of complexity that prevents you from going even further. So one, just know that that's coming. What I would say is it's actually realizing that I have to set goals way higher than just, I want to get busy and have projects. And those goals are things like, I actually want to be focused and not wearing 10 or 20 different hats. I want to be focused on this thing I call genius, meaning what's the thing that I do that is my gift to the world. But to get there, of course, you have to bump up against this ceiling of complexity, set these much bigger, higher goals that have to do with you being focused. And now you're going to start to take all of these things that you really have no business doing and start delegating, building a team, bringing support around you so that you can own your lane and everybody else can own theirs. And this is sort of that next level. This is when a studio is at 500,000 and they cross over 1 million and 1.5 million, and they keep going because they've broken through the old mindsets.
Totally. And all of that's true. And a lot of that is like building the team and absolutely delegating. What would be with strategy as far as how would
the actual offering?
That's the question.
Yeah. It's again, it's tough to answer because it's going to depend on a lot of things. But if I was going to try and generalize, I would say it is this shift from order taker to expert, meaning let's not be a service business. Let's be an expertise business. And expertise has a lot more to do with outputs and results and outcomes. So strategy, of course, is one way to get there, where when your clients are coming to you and they're saying not things like, hey, we need a video. And you would say, sure, I can do a video for you. When they're saying things like, we need to launch this product, we have no idea how to do that.
You're building
This
the
is
360 campaign, aren't you?
but something, right? We don't know what the thing is yet, but you have to be incredibly curious and you have to ask lots of great questions. You have to be much more consultative. You have to do diagnoses and things like this. So you become a lot more curious and you start to realize, wow, the real value we're creating here is understanding the deeper problem, not the project, the problem. And if we can figure out the solution to these kinds of problems, we're going to really help this client. That's going to be worth a lot of money. And they're probably going to come back to us again and again.
And that's like the definition of building that trust, because, right, not only are they just blown away with the fact that they came to you for, in the scope of it, a very small project, and now you're like literally like an executive partner for them.
Yep. Yeah, this is often where studios will find, right? These are some of the mindset shifts that I love to teach, where I've had some studios double, triple. I had one that raised their prices and revenue 900% over the course of a year because they realized, oh, we've just been taking what's handed to us or waiting for permission. And if we shift our mindset to be curious and to diagnose and to actually discover these deeper problems and then pitch those solutions, which come with much bigger price tags and so on, right? Some really exciting things happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you were saying. You can't rely on what worked yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
At Impossible Pictures, did you guys ever have representation? Because really the question is, how valuable is representation? Because I've heard things from this end of the spectrum to that end. Very little, right? Get into it.
Well, yeah. So when I ran Impossible, we worked with about 4 or 5 different reps over the course of 20 years. None of them ever brought us significant work. And what I learned was there's something about the founders. You put them in the right place, in the right rooms when they travel. There's nobody that sells better than you. And that it's not even as simple as, it's not a skill. It's because the founders can see the problems, they can see the solutions, and then they have the resources behind them to back up these big, bodacious claims called, we can figure that out. We can do that. A rep will never do that for you. Even the really great ones, who I know some great ones, and I still recommend them. But my short answer is representation is totally valid as an augmentation strategy, but not as a base strategy. Any studio that is mostly dependent on reps for bringing in work is on its way out of business.
And not doing their job.
Not doing their job. Yeah,
Right?
there's also a proximity to the marketplace that I would argue that if you're just sitting back and waiting for boards, right? It's like the closer you get to
proximity
to the
marketplace,
transactions and all that. Yes. I mean, even getting closer to the consumers and the buyers and the viewers and all that. The more that you are insulated, the more that you are potentially about to get disrupted.
So powerful. Right. That's great. Right. Because you're really isolating yourself. What are your, go on.
I was just going to add this, that I have this thing, I say delegation, not abdication. So when we hire a rep, we often think the motivation behind it, because I hear this from founders all the time when they say, yeah, we just need a rep. What they're doing is they're saying, I just want to hand over the responsibility for sales to someone else. And I'm going to say, sure, that sounds awesome. I wished that too. But I also wish for rainbows and unicorns and, and I want to ride a pony to the office every day. Then there's this wake up call called, okay, until I truly master sales myself, I cannot delegate it, because you can't delegate something you don't understand yourself. That's called abdication, and that always leads to failure. And trust me, when I say failure, lots of money down the drain, wasted time, wasted opportunity. I'll stop there.
Talk about a soundbite. I think I'm going to have a graphic up at that moment of like a hot tip, because that's really powerful, right? You can't delegate that unless you've mastered it.
Yeah, it's just this is, and I get owners, they're overwhelmed. They have so much on their plate. So they just think, oh man, can someone just own this area? Just take it. And I could tell you stories of whether it's sales or if it's even the accountant. Okay. If it's the taxes, whatever the thing is, and they just let somebody else run with it. And then guess what happens? A year or two later, you turn your attention over there and go, oh my God, what a disaster. And there's all this waste, there's fraud, there's mistakes, there's whatever happens. And this is because we abdicate, and it always ends in failure. And I hate it.
So then what are your thoughts on PR? Because that's different than representation.
Love PR. It's expensive, right? So usually studios, until they're, pretty safely over $1 million a year, it's not realistic, because what you get for a small retainer fee from a PR agency when you're small, it's not going to move the needle. It's not going to get results. So you have to bite off a pretty serious firm that's going to do that PR work for you. But when you can afford them and when you're ready, but by the way, ready means you had better be ready to be feeding that machine. And you have to be very ambitious, because they're going to be calling you every week. Well, they're going to call you every week and say, all right, how's it going with this project? And what's going on with that thing? And can we get you on this panel? And are you ready to speak on this podcast? And we need you to write the byline article for the whatever magazine. And they will not suffer fools that think, oh, we hire you and you guys just go do your PR thing. Okay, that again, abdication. Delegation means I'm going to play my part, you're going to play yours, and together we're going to create a win.
We're not advocating or speaking on behalf of any PR folks, but generally speaking, and I don't know if this is like even appropriate because it's like generalizing so much, but what could one expect to pay to even get an ad age? And I know it's not about like one-to-one. There's like a strategy, there's a rollout, there's like months of commitment. I don't know. Can we speak to that to anyone who's listening, to give them like a general, like, God, I just read that studio was just in, again, Ad Age or
Yes,
Screen Magazine. What is this costing people?
Yeah, anyone who says we want to get in, Ad Age or whatever the cool motion design site or something,
right?
It's generally like, it's going to be a 6-month process for the PR agent, whoever, to get up to speed, to be putting you out there. And you should be prepared to spend several thousand a month, maybe $5,000 a month for 6 months, for a year, hopefully forever, if you've got a good, because you're going to see the ROI. But the trick is, right, to anyone that's thinking, well, wait a minute, if I'm spending $4,000, $5,000 a month times 6 months, yeah, you better have $30,000 in your brain allocated to that is what's going to get us in the game, in the PR world. So it's not just can we hire somebody and they'll put a press release out and it'll get us that thing. Those don't, again, I know some great PR agents and I love them, the good ones, and there's a lot of bad ones, but the good ones, when you call them, they'll say, yeah, we can do a one-off project, but it's not really going to get the results you're looking for. We need to be doing this consistently, month in, month out.
Right, because that's really a hard commitment for like anyone who just in their mind thinks like, oh yeah, we want to spend as little as possible with the biggest reach and the loudest bang, and it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, your goal is really to create heat where people are seeing your name here and there and that other place and that other place, and then they see that and then they notice this thing, and it's like this, there's psychological models that talk about it's the 7th time or the 11th time, and after people have consumed your content however many hours, it's not the one and done. It is not the amazing press release, the really cool project, and boom, everybody believes. In fact, the human brain is skeptical of all that shit. So we treat everything the first time, the second time, the third time as it's not meaningful. It doesn't register. But when I see the 7th, the 11th, whatever time, I start to believe these people and what they're talking about and what they're doing is real.
Is that the threshold? Like, and I'm sure, like, knowing you, is 7 kind of like a number where it's like,
there's different
psychologically
examples. Yes, I'm giving it more or less as a principle, right? As a concept.
Okay.
But it's that idea of
I get it. Yeah, of course.
It's the idea also in sales when let's say if you and I bumped into each other and met each other at the coffee shop, and I'd be like, "Hey, Brian." But then if I am picking up my kid at school and you're there, "Oh, your kid goes here? Oh, hey, how's it going?" Okay, that has to happen like 3, 4, 5 more times before you would say the phrase, "Joel, I know Joel." That word know is a different place in your brain. It's the same thing with you when you're receiving PR or someone's pitching you on sales. It's this idea of, yeah, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth interaction, there's really nothing there. And then a threshold gets crossed where you say, "Oh, I know that person. Now I'm on the way to I like that person." And then I'm on the way to I trust that person. So that's that broad model. It applies to sales, PR, marketing, all of that.
What makes a studio successful?
The one thing.
Well, okay, so let me put it to you this way.
Yeah, give it to me.
Some people think it's doing great work. Some people that's like truly like you look at it and you're like, yeah, that's fucking amazing. Some people think how many statues you have on the wall. Some people look at revenue. There's a lot of measures as far as what a founder, investor, owner feel that they're successful. You could do decent work and be making a lot of money. That person can feel they're very successful. And some could argue, yeah, they are. They're making over $1 million doing that kind of work. They're really successful. What do you find to be success for a studio?
I mean, what you just highlighted, I think, is great, because what we're really talking about is satisfaction. Like, for you as a business owner, what does satisfaction look like? Because that's success, meaning I had a goal, I had a dream, I went for it, I busted my ass, and I reached something where I can sit back and say, that is really freaking satisfying. I did it. So for some people, that is freedom. For some people, that's money, right? For some people, it's like recognition and glory, all this kind of thing. So it's different things to different people. So the definition totally shifts. But I would just simply say, I think a successful studio is a studio where the founders and the team are satisfied. They're not in this continual state of frustration, which often looks like, we are capable of so much more. Why can't we? What's stopping us? What's holding us back? I think that's really what drives most founders and creatives a bit nuts. Yeah, it drives us nuts because we know we are capable of doing really great work and making really good money and having a lot of freedom and independence. And it's some combination of those three things that until we reach it, we have this angst of, man, what do I got to do to get there? So once you define it, then I think you can start to actually put the pieces in place and realize it.
So for Impossible Pictures, like, what was your satisfaction? When was that met?
I don't know. It was never fully met, but I would say probably this was in year, this was like in year 16, 17 for me. I can remember we were starting to approach about 5 million in revenue. So we were doing projects of a size that I knew we were solving the size problems that I felt called to solve, right? So for example, one satisfaction was we did the launch and rebrand of Velocity Network for Discovery.
Awesome.
And that was a little over $1 million project.
That's awesome.
Really,
you guys did that.
Cool. Yeah.
Sweet.
And
dude.
what was satisfying was going to the giant boondoggle in New York when they announced the network to the whole media world. I was there with my team, and David Zaslav, the CEO of Discovery, like makes his way through the crowd to find me and shake my hand and say, "Dude, you guys nailed it. When I first saw your pitch, I knew this is it. This is gonna be successful." So those kinds of moments are the moments that you look back and say, okay, pinch me, because that's exactly what I fucking dreamed about for all these years when I said, I want to launch a studio that makes work that people see, that has an impact, that makes, an impact on the lives of my clients, but also on viewers and of course my team. And I got to do it more or less on my own terms, meaning I got to live in Colorado. I got to have a high level of freedom. I got to work with the most awesome, coolest team in the world. That's a good life.
You said mostly satisfied. What do you feel that maybe you wish you could have achieved? Even though you did leave, because at some point you were either satisfied to a degree, or certainly I know that there's bigger things in life at some point that you want to achieve, and you've kind of been there, done that. But was there anything that, gosh, I wish we could have done this?
Well, so two things. One would be, I think our creative work was really good, but it could have been great. And I take a lot of the responsibility on myself, because this is going to sound douchey. I wasn't enough of an asshole at times.
No, I know what you mean. Go on. Yeah.
I wasn't really good at holding others always to the same standard to which I held myself. And I feel like, looking back, I could have called not only myself, but my team to an even higher standard. And it would have been, I think, to everyone's benefit. So there's a certain comfort level that I bought into. But the second thing would be financially, that I didn't run my business the way that I would run it now, based on what I know now.
Like
in
what?
Which case, well, meaning managing production in a way where you totally understand your costs. You know exactly how to delegate projects to producers such that profit is bulletproof. And this meant I dealt with a lot of scope creep and a lot of losing money on jobs and things like this. Compounded over 20 years, we're talking about probably a few $1,000,000 that I could have had in a savings account between me and my business partner. And we didn't. And it's fine. We made a good living. I'm not complaining, but I just look back and realize, wow, I just didn't know enough about how to really manage production and finance in the way that I do now.
A lot of, studio founders, owners are like the EP, or like need to be the creative director.
Mm-hmm.
At what point where did you fall?
So I started off as 3D and animator, then compositor, flame artist, editor, then was art director, creative director. Then there was this moment where it was around, I want to say this was around year 11 or 12, where my team very lovingly came to me and said, "You're fired." Meaning, we don't want you in the chair anymore, because you being the flame artist, right, or the lead designer, or even the creative director, it's not your genius. And they called me out. I was also the IT guy. I mean, I was wearing so many hats still. So the struggle is real, and everybody deals with this. That was the shift when I said, I'm going to be the president of this damn company, and I'm going to focus on sales and marketing. And we hired the people we needed to hire to delegate IT. I hired a top-notch flame artist, Hector from Chicago, and on it went. And I never sat in the chair as an artist anymore. Now, a lot of people say, "Oh, what a bummer."
Right.
Not for me, because I had gotten the creative thing kind of out of my system. Now, I was still the executive creative director. I could walk into any room at any time and say, "Sorry, that's not good enough." Or I would come in with the idea and say, "Hey, what about this?" So I was still responsible as the guy at the top to make sure that the work was as good as it could be. But when I started to focus on sales and marketing, managing my team, leading, that was a big game changer for me. And I loved it.
Was it hard delegating the day-to-day creative director?
Not really.
That's relinquishing a lot of control, right? Like,
it wasn't. I had Mitch, I had Brian, I had Hector, meaning the team that I had built. What I knew was,
wait a minute, I didn't know
these people are better than me. They're better than me. Even on a good day, I cannot touch someone like Mitch Munson. So Yeah, he's the creative director. Love it. Done. I'm
I
out.
didn't know that. I didn't know he
Yeah.
was your creative director.
Mhm.
That's so cool.
Right? Yeah, for several years that was sort of an apex for us when we did Velocity and some of those other types of projects. So, no, for me it was an absolute joy to be able to again collaborate, because as the president and the founder, I'm giving everybody what they need and making sure that they have the money, the operations, the resources, and all those things. But it wasn't really difficult for me to let go of the creative.
Yeah, it's probably great, right? Like, so you can focus on really like what's more important and like you shouldn't be in the minutia.
What happens is, sure, there's the first time, the second time, the third time, and then you start realizing all of this work is way better than what I would have done. So I'm just more and more delegating more and more and more, which was great.
In the very beginning, though, and I asked Ronnie this from Oddbeats, the same question. When you first started out, you were like the creative guy, right? Like you were like Impossible Pictures creatively was you. Was it difficult for you at the point where Impossible Pictures needed to be Impossible Pictures, not Joel?
Sure.
You know, because that's a major shift.
Yes.
What was that
Yes.
like for you?
Really interesting question. I think it was a born out of necessity that when we moved the studio into downtown Denver, and we started to pick up business from JWT, which had the Ford account. We started working directly with Dish Network. And as I started to grow the team, there became this natural transition where people are not coming to Impossible just because they like working with Joel. Now, I will say that never went away, because even when we were at 5 million, I had clients that said, hate to tell you, Joel, I love your team, but I'm here because of you. That always surprised me, because I always thought, no, it's about everybody else. So founders don't miss that. But it was, yeah, it was for me. This
Correct.
was probably like year 8 or 9 for me when I started making the shift from, oh, it's not the Joel show, it's now Impossible Pictures, and fostering that team and letting them lead the creative and letting them build the relationships with the clients. And I was in that mix, but it was no longer just about me.
What is the new category of work that's untapped, in your opinion, that motion studios should start thinking about maybe going after?
Well, I'll give you 2. One is brand direct, which we can unpack, and the other one is experiential. Because brand direct is the tough nut to crack, but roughly 500,000 brands in the world that are all waking up to this reality called, wow, we need to be a lot more like a TV network. We need to produce content. Our brand needs to be in motion. Everybody's waking up to it. Now it's hard to get in. It's not easy to convert them into buyers, but this is the way. I'm convinced. And I'm doubling down on this, and I have been for almost 20 years now, been advocating, like, get out of the agency work, get out of entertainment, right? This is the future. And then the other thing I'll just say is, this is very anecdotally, but experiential and immersive AR, VR, all of that sort of like live events and activations and that kind of thing. The clients that I'm working with in that space are busy and booked many, many months, if not years, into the future. So I'm just seeing a pattern there and saying, whatever that is a good thing.
Yeah, experiential is a big one. In Vegas, I think there's tremendous opportunity, and a lot of people. I know you work with laundry, and they do a lot of the sphere stuff. But um, yeah, I think also like hospitality is a huge one, and like hotels, coming around to like content, um, and even like the medical field. And I don't mean doing like the 3D flying through, DNA and blood cells and not that kind of stuff, but just I think I don't want to say hipper, but I feel like brands and companies that are generally dry categories of work that isn't like entertainment and Marvel and
Hmm.
are getting around to it. And those are things that like we've been focusing on for years, and it's like paying off. And again, it's also a mindset where it's not always like real worthy. It's not, it'll never be sexy, but there's something to say also about, a volume of work, right? I
Absolutely.
mean,
Absolutely. Yeah. The bread and butter clients, or as we say, one for the real, one for the meal.
book and the
So
relationship. Yeah.
yep, exactly. So yeah, I think those are all good categories to look at. If I was running a studio today, that's where I would be making sure that I was pushing into those spaces.
It's time for,
Okay. Favorite
ladies
things.
and gentlemen, Joel Pilger, his favorite things. Here we go. Your favorite wine.
I'm locking up Faust.
Your favorite sandwich
Italian hero.
from anywhere specific.
New York.
I'm a Jew, so I can talk about this all day long, and I'm not kidding you, but okay. Your favorite dessert.
Chocolate mousse.
Favorite book.
I'm gonna say
One of them, of course. I mean,
Yeah,
what
right.
is it?
I'm gonna say Wild at Heart.
Favorite, and this is just as bad, but one of favorite movie.
Shawshank Redemption.
What would be
La
the
La
second?
Land. I got to put another one up there.
Wow, really?
But yeah, La La Land, super top of my list.
Wow. Okay, I want to unpack that more. I just have a few more. Your biggest pet peeve, just in life or in business or personal, doesn't matter.
Judginess.
Totally. What's your favorite music or band, Joel?
Rush.
Sweet. That was we had Rush going. My college roommate John Howard. We played Rush all the time. Wow, look at
Nothing-
you.
Right? Yeah.
You and Jordan Schlansky from Conan O'Brien. He loves it too. What's your favorite color?
I'm gonna go with orange for the moment.
What do you want your legacy to be? I don't know if you're going to ever want to retire. Maybe you will. But when you really kind of take a moment and think about, what does Joel want his legacy to be? What is this all for? What are you going to be like? Wow, I'm satisfied.
Well, in a way, I'm laughing because in a way, I'm kind of already retired because somebody recently asked me, what do you want to do when you retire? And I'm like, well, I want to travel. I want to teach. I want to help. I want to inspire.
doing
I want to
that.
experience. And they were like, so you're kind of retired. I said, yeah. Honestly, my legacy, what I'm aiming for, and it's not to have a legacy, it's just my desire, is I want to see the creatives of the world unleashed. And what I know is that their lack of understanding and lack of mastery in business is what holds the whole thing back. It holds them back from having the impact and the influence, the credit, the recognition, the money, all the things that they are entitled to. But most of all, the world loses. If we don't understand how to have a seat at the table and play this game and be in business, our work is going to suffer, our impact is going to suffer, and the world is going to suffer most of all, because the world needs the creatives more than ever right now, right? This is part of the reason I talk about La La Land as my favorite movie, is that if you read the song, the lyrics to the song Audition, about crazy are the fools who dream, I mean, every time I hear that song, it just like brings tears to me, because the creatives are the people crazy enough to see in different colors, imagine new futures, produce new possibilities, and the world needs that. We are the ones who are going to move society and culture forward. But if we don't master business, it ain't going to happen.
I love that. Joel, thank you again so much. Just an honor and pleasure to have you. And thanks for your time, man. It's been wonderful.
You're so welcome, dude. Thank you for the great questions and going way back to the old days of my childhood and everything like that. So I look forward to sharing this with my fans and followers, and appreciate what you're doing.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bryan.